One afternoon in the heat of a Galilean marketplace, Jesus and the inner circle were walking through the dust and the noise when they witnessed something that made the very air turn cold. A woman was screaming at a merchant. She was not arguing. She was not negotiating. She was vibrating with a rage so disproportionate, so violent that it felt alien. It was over a few copper coins, a trivial dispute. But her face was contorted into a mask of pure hatred. And her eyes. Peter froze when he saw them. They were not her eyes anymore. They were empty. They were distant. They were black holes sucking the light out of the space around her. The energy coming off her was heavy. It was oppressive. It was feeding on the fear of the merchant. It was feeding on the confusion of the crowd. Peter turned to the master and asked in a whisper, "Master, there is something using her. How do we cast it out? How do we save her?" Jesus watched the woman for a long moment. He did not step forward. He did not raise his hand. He merely observed the entity operating the strings of her biology. And then he said something the church would spend centuries trying to erase from human memory. He said, "You do not cast it out. You silence it." When an Archon operates through a human vessel, it needs two things to sustain the possession. It needs their voice, and it needs your reaction. Remove either one and it loses power immediately. Remove both and it starves. I am going to teach you how to remove both, not through ritual, not through exorcism, but through recognition and declaration. And when you do this, the Archon goes silent. It cannot speak through them anymore, and without a voice, it has no power. This teaching never made it into the canon. It was scrubbed. It was hidden. The church removed every reference to Archon silencing because they understood the danger of this knowledge. If Christians knew they could neutralize demonic manipulation in the people around them without priests, without holy water, without institutional intervention, what would they need exorcisms for? What would they need the church for? The entire system of spiritual authority collapses when protection becomes this direct, when it becomes this accessible, when it becomes this undeniable. But the Gnostics preserved it, hidden in the jars, hidden in the desert, hidden in the texts the orthodoxy tried to burn. And tonight, you are receiving what Jesus taught to the chosen ones in the dust of that marketplace 2,000 years ago. Not exorcism, not banishment, silencing. The technique that makes Archons lose their ability to speak through the people you love. And they fear this technique more than anything you could ever do. Because once you know how to silence them in others, they can no longer use your closest relationships as weapons against you. They lose their primary leverage. If you are ready to silence the interference, if you are ready to close the portals in your life, they have no voice right now below. Lock that frequency in. Because before I give you the exact technique Jesus taught, the 3-step protocol to neutralize the parasite, you need to understand what is actually happening when someone you know suddenly attacks you. You need to understand the mechanics of the ambush. Most chosen ones make the same fatal mistake. You think the person is the problem. You look at your family. You look at your friends, you look at your partner, and you think, my mother is toxic, my coworker is narcissistic, my partner is controlling. And you try to fix the person. You try to set boundaries with the person. You try to cut off the person. But here is the terrifying truth. It is not the person. It is the Archon using the person as a portal. Archons cannot interact with you directly in the material density. They exist in frequencies adjacent to the physical dimension. They are non-physical entities. To touch you, to drain you, to to derail your destiny. They need vehicles. They need biological suits. And the most effective vehicles are the people you already have emotional connections with. Your family, your friends, your romantic partners, your coworkers. Anyone you have opened your field to through the bond of relationship. Because once you have an emotional bond with someone, you have created a fiber optic cable of energy between your solar plexus and theirs. And Archons exploit that pathway. They hack the line. Here is how the mechanism works. The Archon attaches to the person's energy field, usually at the back of the neck or the solar plexus. And it waits. It is patient. It waits for specific moments. Moments when you are vulnerable. Moments when you have just had a spiritual breakthrough. Moments when you are about to make a move toward your divine purpose. And then it activates. It floods the host with thoughts, emotions, and impulses that are not theirs. And the person, not recognizing the manipulation, acts on them. They become the puppet. They say things they would not normally say. They attack you over issues that do not matter. They escalate conflicts out of nowhere. And you, because you love them, because you trust them, you engage. You defend yourself. You argue back. You cry. You scream. And that is exactly what the Archon wanted. Because the moment you engage emotionally, the moment you drop your frequency to match their rage, you have opened the valve. You are feeding the farm. Here is why you recognize this when most people do not. You are pneumatic. You are a seed of the monad. You have been sensing this your entire life. Think back, that feeling when someone you love suddenly turns on you and something feels off. That moment when you look at them and think, this is not like them. That recognition in your gut that says, this is not their voice. That is not paranoia. That is not you being overly sensitive. That is your divine spark perceiving the overlay. That is your spirit seeing the parasite. Most people cannot feel the difference between someone being genuinely upset and someone being used as a weapon. To the Hylix, it all looks the same. But to you, it feels different. It tastes metallic. It feels heavy. You always knew. You just did not have the language for it until now. So how do you know for sure when an Archon is speaking through someone? There are 5 specific signs, and you have likely seen these your whole life without naming them. First, the sudden energy shift. The person goes from normal to hostile in seconds. There is no ramp up, there is no reasonable trigger. It is like a switch was flipped. Second, the disproportionate reaction. They are furious about something trivial, a dirty dish, a missed call, a wrong word. The emotional explosion does not match the situation because the emotion is not coming from the situation. It is coming from the entity. Third, the eyes change. This is the most common sign. When an Archon is actively using someone, their eyes go empty, or they go distant, or they get an unnatural intensity like a predator focusing on prey. You have seen this. You have looked into the eyes of someone you love and seen a stranger staring back. Fourth, they say things that are not them. They use phrases they do not normally use. They know exactly where to hit you. They target your deepest insecurities with surgical precision. That is the Archon accessing your file and feeding the data through their voice. And fifth, the amnesia. Afterward, when the entity disengages, they do not fully remember, or they backtrack. They will say, I do not know why I got so upset. That is them returning to themselves after the possession ends. You have been seeing this pattern your entire life, in your childhood home, in your friendships, in your bed. And you have probably felt crazy because no one else seemed to notice. No one else could see that the person wasn't fully present during those attacks, but you saw it. Because you are chosen. Because your perception operates at a frequency most humans cannot access. And that perception is not a curse. It is preparation, because now tonight you are learning what to do with what you have always seen. Jesus saw this happening constantly. He saw the grid of manipulation, people being used as weapons against each other to keep the vibration of the planet low, to keep the collective in a state of constant conflict, and he taught the inner circle something the church could not allow. He taught them how to silence the Archon using the person. Not exorcise it, not banish it. Silence it. Because when you silence an Archon's ability to speak through a vessel, the attack stops. Immediately. The portal closes. And you are about to learn exactly how to do that. Now, I'm going to give you the exact technique Jesus taught for silencing Archons operating through the people around you. But first, I must tell you what not to do, because your instincts are likely wrong. Your programming is wrong. When someone attacks you and you sense the Archon manipulation, your first instinct is to confront it. You want to say, you are not yourself right now. Something is using you. You want to wake them up. Do not do that. The moment you externalize the recognition, you have given the Archon something to work with. It will use the person to deny, to gaslight, to call you crazy. Your confrontation just gave it more fuel. Your second instinct is to argue with the content of the attack. You want to defend yourself. You want to explain why they are wrong. Do not do that either. The content does not matter. The Archon does not care if you win the argument. It does not care about the dirty dish or the missed call. It cares that you engaged. It cares that you reacted. As long as you are arguing, you are feeding. Your third instinct is to try to cast it out, to command it to leave in Jesus' name. Do not. Exorcism requires conditions most people do not have. And attempting it without proper authority, without the proper vibrational standing, usually just angers the Archon and makes the attack worse. So if you do not confront, and you do not argue, and you do not cast it out, what do? You silence it. And silencing is different. Silencing does not engage the war. It ends the transmission. Here is the technique. The protocol Jesus taught has 3 components. Each one is a lock. Each one must be turned in sequence. Miss any piece and you are back to a normal interaction with a possessed person. But do all 3 correctly, and the Archon loses its voice immediately. Component 1 is internal recognition. You have to identify what is happening in your own awareness without externalizing it. When the person starts attacking, when they start draining, when the eyes change, you say to yourself silently, internally, this is not them. This is an Archon using them. You name it, not out loud, in the citadel of your mind. And that recognition shifts your frequency immediately. You stop reacting to the person. You stop taking it personally. You stop feeling hurt. You stop feeling defensive, because you have identified the source. It is not your mother being cruel. It is an Archon using your mother. It is not your friend betraying you. It is an Archon using your friend. The person is the vehicle. And once you recognize that, your emotional reaction dissolves. You are no longer in the victim frequency. You are in the observer frequency. And that shift is critical. Because Archons feed on emotional reactivity. The moment you stop providing that, you have cut off half their power supply. You have started the starvation process. Component 2 is visual anchoring. This is where most people fail. They either avoid eye contact, which signals weakness, or they stare into the eyes, which creates a connection. Neither works. What Jesus taught is specific. You look at the person, but you do not look into their pupils. You look at the point between their eyebrows, the third eye center, and you focus there. Not aggressively, not with a glare, just with a steady, piercing gaze. You are looking at them, but you are seeing through them. This does something the Archons cannot handle. It breaks the illusion of the persona. When you look into someone's eyes during conflict, you are engaging person to person, ego to ego. That creates resonance. The Archon can work with that, but when you anchor your vision at their third eye and see through the biology, you are not engaging the surface anymore. You are perceiving beyond the material, and the Archon feels that. It feels you, seen past the vessel directly toward the operator. It destabilizes the entity because its primary weapon is stealth. It relies on you believing it is the person. The moment you see through the mask, it knows you know, and that knowing shifts the power dynamic instantly. It panics. Component 3 is internal declaration. While you are holding that visual anchor, while you are seeing through the vessel, you speak 3 sentences, not out loud, in your mind, but with the volume of thunder. You speak with absolute certainty. You speak with the authority of the monad. The 3 sentences are, I see the Archon, not the person. The Archon has no voice here. Silence now. That is it. 3 statements. First statement, I see the Archon. You are naming what you perceive. You are stripping away the camouflage. Second statement, not the person. You are separating the individual from the entity. You are refusing to condemn the vessel. You are holding space for the person to be innocent even as you address the parasite. Third statement, the Archon has no voice here. This is the key. This is the silencing. You are not commanding it to leave the planet. You are declaring that in this specific space-time coordinate, in this specific interaction, it has no permission to speak. It has no permission to use these vocal cords as a weapon. And because you are speaking from the sovereign observer frequency, your declaration carries weight. It collapses the probability of the attack continuing. Jesus combined these 3 components into one fluid motion. Recognition shifts your frequency. Visual anchor destabilizes the cover. Declaration removes the voice. And the moment you complete all 3, something happens. It is not subtle, it is immediate. The person's energy changes, visibly. They lose momentum. Their voice shifts. The words stop flowing. They might pause mid-sentence and look confused. They might suddenly feel tired. They might change the subject entirely because the Archon just lost access to the interface. It is still attached. It is still there. But it cannot speak. You silenced it, not through force, through recognition. And without a voice, without the ability to use that person's words to trigger you, it is powerless in that interaction. Here is how you use this in real time. Tomorrow, tonight, when the attack comes. You do not panic. You do not cry. You execute. You think Archon using this person. You anchor your gaze between the brows. You declare, I see the Archon. No voice here. And you watch the puppet strings cut. You do not explain what you did. You do not say, aha, I caught you. You just observe the shift and let the interaction end naturally. The silence did the work. But you must understand who can use this. This is not for everyone. The Hylics, the organic portals, they cannot distinguish between a person and an Archon. They just see the drama. Psychics might sense it, but they get emotionally flooded. They react, and reaction is food. But you are pneumatic. You have the divine spark. You can perceive the manipulation and hold the neutral frequency simultaneously. That is what makes you dangerous to the grid. You do not just see, you can act on what you see. And this technique was designed specifically for your biology. Critical warnings before you use this. First, do not weaponize this to win petty arguments. This is for genuine Archon manipulation only. You will know the difference. Real conflict feels uncomfortable. Archon attacks feel invasive. They feel slimy. They feel wrong. Use it only when you feel the presence. Second, never explain it to the person afterward. They will not understand. They cannot understand. If you tell them an entity was using them, they will think you are insane, and their fear will create an opening for the Archon to re-engage. Keep the silence. The power is in the secrecy. Third, some relationships will dissolve after you start doing this. There are relationships in your life where the Archon bond is the only thing holding it together. When you stop feeding the parasite, the relationship dies. That is not a loss. That is liberation. Let it go. Fourth, genuine relationships will get stronger because you are removing the interference. You are clearing the static between you and the people who truly matter. The Archons fear this technique more than prayer, more than meditation, more than any protective ritual, because this technique removes their primary attack vector. They do not usually attack you directly. They are cowards. They attack you through others. They use your emotional bonds as highways. They weaponize intimacy. They turn your sanctuaries into battlefields. And most people never realize it. They just think their life is filled with difficult people. They never see the puppeteers. But you see them now, and you have the code to stop them. Not by hiding in a cave, not by cutting everyone off, but by silencing the influence. When you consistently silence Archon manipulation in the people around you, you become unreachable. You become a dead zone for their radar. They cannot touch you because they cannot use proximity against you. They cannot turn your mother into a weapon. They cannot use your best friend to drain you. You have closed the access point. And that is what the church could not allow you to know. If you knew you could neutralize the demonic without their help, their authority dissolves. You do not need a priest to protect you. You have the technique. You are the protection. If you are going to use this technique, if you are going to claim your sovereignty over your relationships, do 3 things right now. First, comment. They have no voice below. This is your declaration. This is you telling the field that you know the game and you are changing the rules. Let the other chosen ones see that you are activating this tonight. Second, subscribe to Divine Codes because the war is escalating and I have more techniques. Techniques for clearing spaces, techniques for breaking generational curses, techniques for protecting groups. You need to be here when they are released. Third, like this video. It signals the algorithm to find the other Pneumatics. It helps wake up the remnant. Do it now. Your action matters. Then, tonight, when someone attacks you, when the energy shifts, when the eyes change, remember, it is not them. It is the parasite. Do not argue. Do not defend. Recognize, anchor, declare. I see the Archon, not the person. The Archon has no voice here. And watch the silence fall. Watch the power return to you. They have no voice.